welcome to AP Capstone Corner. If you're on this video, you are probably figuring out what exactly it's going to mean to teach AP Seminar. I was in your shoes not too long ago. This is really a course that gives you a lot of freedom, and that's really exciting, but it's also a course that can be daunting in regards to your first year, figuring out, okay, how am I thematically gonna organize this? There's these external pressures of AP performance tasks as well as exams, and maybe you went to a training that your school sent you to and you're still really not sure what this course is gonna look like. So this video is all about figuring out, okay, what is AP Seminar all about? What steps can you take to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success, even if it's just the first year of you teaching AP Seminar? We're gonna cover three main things in this video. Number one, what is AP Seminar and what are the performance tasks that this course is oriented around? Secondly, how do you pick a theme and then build a class that reflects something that's both going to be culturally responsive to the students you teach, as well as interesting to you individually as a teacher? And then lastly, we're going to talk about concrete next steps to start to get your plans down so that you can make a really head start on where you're headed for the rest of the year. All right, so let's get started. Number one, what is AP Seminar? Well, AP Seminar is a course that's part of the AP Capstone offered by College Board. The full AP Capstone is AP Seminar and then AP Research. There's small R research is what we do in AP Seminar, and then there's big R research in what we do in AP Research. What I mean by small R research is this is research that is often uncovering information that is new to the student, but not necessarily new to the field or discipline, right? We're not gathering data, performing experiments, meta-analysis like we would do with a AP research paper. And so I often say in AP Seminar, we are downstream using research to build arguments and reports, whereas in AP Research, we go upstream to the actual creation of new data, and we do big R research. That is research that is putting something new forth or doing something in a way that hasn't been done before, that method. But there's other videos that are linked here about AP Research. Today's focus is about AP Seminar. Now, the way the course is structured is it's structured around two main performance tasks and then an exam. The first performance task is called the IRR. It stands for Individual Research Report. And after the students complete the IRR, they're also engaged with the TMP, the Team Multimedia Presentation. Now, this part is sometimes challenging for students because it relies heavily on teamwork and the use of teams to explore a topic as a group, go off into individual disciplines to explore this topic through a lens, and then lastly come back where they then come up with a presentation that identifies some area within this topic that they've chosen. And then from there, they build a presentation that's a solution to a problem within their area. So I'm going to show you some sort of graphs, maybe some visuals to help break this down. But essentially, here's how it begins. Number one, students pick their groups. With their group, they decide what is a topic that they want to focus on. So let's use an example. Let's say the topic is immigration. Once students have a topic, they're not all going to write the same paper, right? Like, immigration is such a massive topic. There's so many different ways to look at this and different ways academic disciplines explore this. So students pick different lenses through which to explore this topic. Let's say one student wants to look at the economic aspects of immigration. Maybe another student will look at this from a historical lens. So they'll look at immigration in the United States from either certain time periods or focusing on certain groups. And then maybe even another person wants to look at it from a scientific perspective. They'll look at the mental health impacts of immigration and integration and pressures of assimilation. Regardless, this is where students have quite a bit of freedom, both to choose the topic and to choose their lens. Now, as a teacher, you cannot assign, like, you have to write this or that, but you can certainly shape this project by maybe deciding as a group to focus on a single topic. So you could say, as a class, each group we're gonna explore something about immigration. And I have worked with teachers who did the IRR, and all the groups had to choose incarceration. And then they all chose different ways to explore incarceration, but the whole class was centered around sort of one bigger theme that the teacher predetermined. And that ended up being sort of a theme that was a major theme throughout the course. And this is where, if you want to make AP Seminar sort of focused on another content area, like this, in this AP Seminar, we're really focusing on climate change, or we're really focusing on history. This is a place where you can do that. However, I tend to let groups choose topics. I often suggest a bucket of topics like immigration, abortion, climate change, gun rights, like big topics that I know there's going to be quite a few sources out there about. And that's the other thing. You want to catch students who are headed into too narrow of a niche that not all their group members are going to be able to find really enough research to make a individual research report about it. So this is sort of the formation of the team and the picking a topic stage. Now, once that's been done, then students head out on their own journey. And this is where they're researching, gathering sources, and building the structure and drafting their IRR. Now, this paper, it's not a super long paper. It's certainly shorter than their individual paper, but this one can be challenging. And there's a whole video that I do that talks about how to organize this, how to roll this out for students. So you'll want to click that and go check out that resource. But for today's video, I'm just giving you a high-level overview. Once the students have then written their individual research reports, they come back together, they share, they read each other's papers, they really build a fuller picture of this topic that they have just explored through their own lens. From there, then they put together this presentation in which everyone has to have a meaningful role and speak and participate, in which now they've presenting their findings, presenting the different information from their different lenses, and offering some sort of solution. So maybe with my immigration group, the person who wrote the history one, maybe they're at the beginning of the presentation giving us some background and history. Someone else maybe from the scientific perspective, where they looked at the mental health of those who immigrate. Maybe that's part of their solution, is more resources and support for new immigrants arriving in this country. And maybe their research that they found in their report really helps reinforce why their solution should work. Okay, once that has happened, that's when the course will then head in a more individual direction. That's really like the teamwork portion of the course. Now, in the AP Institutes, a lot of people will say that you should do mock papers. I really like that idea. They say, like, run the IRR, do a mock and then do the real thing. Do a mock of the papers, and then I love the idea of giving students 2 turns at bat. However, depending on your roster, your pacing, student readiness, this may not be realistic. I usually have a roster, and I'm not kidding, I have 103 students enrolled. Now, when they write an 8-page paper, that's 800 pages that I have to read and grade. And so doing that 4 times, 3 times, that's often unrealistic. Plus, some students may or may not have the paper writing skills necessary. So I really like to invest more in the actual paper, and instead of having them prepare mocks and then I have that feedback sequence, I try to do lots of workshops when they're writing to really slow down and focus on specific skills that maybe would be caught in the mock. So I'll take a look at what the common issues are and then do workshops based on that. So those are some notes and thoughts about the first portion of the course, the IRR and the TMP. I usually like to do this before, in the US, before we have our holiday break. Then around January, December, the College Board will release the stimulus materials. Now, what does that mean? The second performance task, this one really changes every year in terms of its theme, and here's how this one works. The second performance task is called the IWA. And in this paper, students, they're basically at its core presenting a problem and a solution to it, and addressing multiple solutions, alternative solutions, and really trying to establish their opinion on an issue. However, here's the catch. With this one, it has to be inspired by a theme from the stimulus sources. Now, what is that? Each year, the College Board decides here is going to be the theme of this year's sources, and then they put together a number of sources. It's usually 7 sources. Some of these sources can be videos, they can be images, paintings, articles that would be found in publications like The Atlantic or New York Times, and then other times you have like hardcore research articles that are 20, 30 pages long from scientific journals. And you are not allowed to tell the students what the theme is, nor confirm what the theme is. But usually you can tell. Once you've reviewed the stimulus sources yourself, you usually can tell what the theme is. The way I usually roll this out is before we get into any paper writing, right, we have to look at these stimulus sources. This is also a great opportunity to rehearse some skills that are going to be assessed on the AP exam, like figuring out what are the main arguments and claims and evaluating evidence that exists in these sources. So I usually really take source by source, devoting at least a whole lesson to each of the 7 sources so that students not just really understand these sources, but also that they build some of these skills that they'll be assessed on in the exam. Another key thing here is I've seen this course go wrong where it turns into like a thematic study hall where students are just writing and researching. And while that's great for some students, other students need the like, here's a lesson with like an opening, a middle, a takeaway, and it changes. And you as a teacher get to be up there like analyzing text, doing the teaching thing. And the stimulus sources are a great chance to reground students in that day-to-day flow maybe they're more used to in their other contents like ELA or history. And so I really like this portion of the course. It's a great way to build engagement and investment, especially after they've been really like nitty-gritty trying to finish presentations and papers and working mostly as groups. This brings the whole class together and centers them. Now, in terms of these stimulus sources, once they've identified a shared theme, they then have to write a paper that is inspired by this shared theme and utilizes at least 2 sources, using them just like they would use any other sources. So essentially they have to in their paper make a connection to the stimulus materials. That's the College Board prerogative, right? They don't say what kind of theme, what topic. Students are gonna be like, oh, the theme is courage, and then be like, my paper is about courage. No, that's not what we're looking for here. It's a theme that should be inspiring a topic. Courage is not really a topic, it's so broad. And what is the solution to that problem? So instead, think about it like this. If the theme is courage, and these shared sources are showing that like, it's saying it's important to have moral courage, do the right thing, even when, you know, society is pressuring you to do the wrong thing. Maybe here is where then you got to figure out a topic. Okay, what topic kind of connects with that theme? And so I had a student who did something about increasing protections for whistleblowers. So they made an argument about how in a lot of business practices, people choose not to say something even when there's unsavory business or even illegal business happening because of fear of repercussions or because of NDA disclosures. And so their paper became about passing regulation that is going to make an environment that's much more open and forgiving for whistleblowers to make sure that companies are being held responsible and that people are being encouraged to do the right thing in these regards. There you go. That's a topic that's not just the theme, but it's inspired by the theme. All right, so that's really how we should be thinking about incorporating the stimulus texts into the IWA. Now, the IWA process, in the spring, there tends to be more disruptions, spring break, etc. So this can take some time. Pacing, gotta be honest, pacing is a concern in this course, especially if you try doing any of the mock sequences where they write a mock IWA or IRR. That's why I really recommend just focusing on taking your time and just knocking out each performance assessment. All right, so once they've really identified their IWA, they've written that argument, they've really taken care to make sure that they're acknowledging multiple solutions and really asserting their argument. That's the big paper. Pacing is a concern. This takes a while, especially because it's happening usually in the winter and spring where there's a lot more breaks and things that might get in the way of the pacing. And so here you really want to make sure you're leaving yourself enough time for the presentation sequence as well as preparing for the exam. In terms of the presentation, it's a lot more straightforward than the TMP, the team presentation, where they have to come together and kind of come up with a new idea to present this solution. This is really the IMP, the individual media presentation, is truly sort of the IWA in presentation form. Now, it doesn't mean we should be pasting entire paragraphs, but for this presentation, if they've done most of the thinking and development in their paper, they're really just working on how do I present this in a really cohesive, straightforward, and well-designed manner. And then the way I do it, I know some classes, they'll have students present in front of the whole class. While I like this idea, with the length of these presentations, 8 to 10 minutes, I just don't have time to devote that many class periods to watching presentations. So what I usually do is I ask my school for a sub, and then I just see them back to back to back. Like I mentioned earlier, I have 103 students. So there's a week where I'm watching 103 presentations and grading these. Now this grade for both this one and the previous presentation, that gets straight into College Board and you actually shape their score. Whereas with the papers, you're not grading it. Now, I like to grade my students' paper with the rubric and let them know what I think they would get and give them some big general ideas of where they can improve. But their final score for the papers are by AP graders, which I myself am one. Teachers from around the country and the world, they grade these different papers as to not be biased towards their own students. Now, that takes us through the performance tasks, right? We started with the IRR. With our group, we picked and explored a topic through a lens. Then we put together a presentation based on that topic. Then we were given stimulus materials from College Board. We identified a shared theme. We developed an argument based on a topic of our choosing, and then we developed a presentation that presents that information. What's left? Unlike AP research, where it's just paper presentation, there's an exam portion, and the exam is significant in regards to how much it makes up the total score. The exam itself is split into two parts, Part A and Part B. Now, I'm going to go over these pretty quickly. Part A is where a student is given an argument, like an article argument usually, and it's usually not more than 2 pages, and their task is to answer 3 questions. question number 1 for part A is, what is the author's main argument, or their sort of big idea, their big claim? And they have to present it in its entirety. Now, this is usually like 1 to 3 sentences. Students should not be writing paragraphs here. This is what is the big idea, saying it succinctly. Then the second question is to identify the claims and the connections between these claims. So this is where students are explaining the author's line of reasoning and how these different claims build on one another to create this more coherent argument. Now, this should be written in paragraph form, and I tell my students, like, this is not poetry. Say things like, the first claim is, this connects to the next claim. You really want to be clear. The graders are grading like hundreds of these, and so the more clear you can be, the better. The third question for part A is to evaluate evidence. Now, this is where you take pieces of evidence, right? Could be quotes, could be people that they interview, research, or statistics they bring out in their argument, and you evaluate whether it's relevant and whether it's credible, how well it supports their argument. I tell students to pick, as many pieces of evidence as they can, given the time limit, but usually like 3 or 4, I would say, is a safe bet. And I even tell them sometimes group it into like, do the first paragraph about the evidence that you find credible. Maybe the next paragraph's about evidence you don't think is so strong. I tell students, like, this is not a right or wrong answer. It's not like identifying the main argument. There is a right answer. With evaluating evidence, it's really students' subjective opinions. Now, it's about, like, can you express why you think it's either good evidence or not? And that's what we're looking for in terms of their thinking skills. Okay, that's part A. Main argument, claims and connections, evaluate evidence. Part B is a little different. I like to call it the mini IWA. And the reason why it's a mini IWA is they get a series of sources, usually like 4 or 5 sources. And these, again, they range from like a painting to a poem to an excerpt from a book or article. It really can vary. And they're supposed to read these, quickly skimming, sort of figuring out, okay, what is the theme, and then writing an argument that is inspired by this theme. Again, same skill with the IWA. You are not writing about the theme, you're writing an argument about a topic that's inspired by the theme, and you have to use 2 of these. So again, mini IWA. Now this is a full essay. This comes out with like paragraphs. You should be referencing evidence. The directions tell you how to do that in terms of citation. And that's part B. The guidelines from the College Board is 30 minutes for the first one, 90 minutes for part B. It's tight. It's definitely tight. So anytime you can build in rehearsals of either of these parts, that's great. I usually spend a week and a half at least towards the end of the class just rehearsing these. I use previous years as rehearsals. And then I do some peer editing so I'm not grading tons of these. And also my school asks for like different assessments throughout the year to like gauge where students are at. And I'll often just do a mini part A or a mini part B. I like to use assessments like that so that by the time students actually sit down for the AP exam, they've done this in some ways before. And then that's it. All of those pieces together build their AP score. The exam, part A and part B, the individual project, IWA and IMP, and then the team project, the IRR and the TMP. And those 3 pieces together build their score and ultimately determine whether or not they get AP credit for the course. That's AP Seminar. As you can see, not really directive on content and theme in terms of what you need to address with the students, really more focused on skills that are exemplified and typified, and students are asked to demonstrate in these 3 big pieces, the 2 performance tasks and the exam. Can be daunting, but also a ton of opportunity to take this course in a direction that you want to take it with your students. Okay, so the first part of this video is done. That's the majority of the video, is really giving you an overview of the performance tasks, what really goes into AP Seminar for those of you who are looking at teaching this for the first time. I want to now spend some time talking about how you should approach sort of picking a theme or orienting or beginning to plan for your course. Now, I've seen it done in lots of different ways. Like I was mentioning earlier, one of my colleagues, they sort of chose incarceration as a big theme that they would explore throughout the different units, and we're encouraging students to really choose topics associated with this concept of incarceration for their papers. I'll share with you a little bit about how I approach it, and I've approached it in different ways. The first year I taught it, the theme I chose was power, and I wanted to choose a really big, broad theme that there could be lots of different connections with, and we could explore it in different ways. But the big theme was like, what is power? Who has power in our society? And then the topics I encouraged them to explore were looking at different stakeholders with power and how they can impact change. And so notice it's pretty broad. I'm keeping it fairly broad so that student interest can really drive it. You definitely don't want to pick something that you know that students are going to have a hard time connecting with or engaging with. So I'm just going to walk you through how I design my units, and also just to plug in the video, if you would like to take a look at my materials, I do offer them on TeachersPayTeachers, and I'd love for you to support me if you want to kind of get some help by looking at some already made materials, already made units. I got everything, slides, handouts, etc. But I usually start with Unit 1, which I focus on identity, community, and justice as the themes. Now, the reason I choose identity, community, and justice is because I'm trying to get to know my students as well. And so we really start with our identities, they do some work introducing one another, and then we start to look at articles related to what does community mean. And here's where I'm practicing skills of like figuring out the main argument of an article, right? You remember you need that for the end of the course exam. And so here students are beginning to practice some of those skills even as early as the third or fourth lesson in terms of unpacking claims, line of reasoning, etc. From there, I'd shift to defining justice. And halfway through the unit, now I'm giving them different sources that are all about justice. And then I connect that bigger theme of justice to the topic of reparations, and I get them ready for their first Socratic seminar where they have like a debate. And in order to do this, I give them, you guessed it, sort of a stimulus packet of sources on reparations with different perspectives and lenses highlighted, and students have to begin to form their own opinion using those. Now, they're not fully writing a paper, but they're basically like developing an argument and an outline of why they believe what they believe, which again, this is sort of rehearsing a lot of the kind of skills that they'll have to use. That's Unit 1. It's a rehearsal of a lot of different skills, and I choose a big question, which at the end of the unit is, are reparations the moral response to the legacy and, centuries of racial injustice that Black Americans have endured? And so that big question that is controversial for some people and has a lot of different articles out there is the guide. And I get there by starting with identity, then looking at community, and then ultimately justice. What does justice look like for different communities whose experiences depend upon their identities, right? Then from there we go and we introduce the IRR. I know, already Unit 2, I'm headed to the IRR. This whole unit is focused on team building, picking a topic, doing the IRR. From there, then Unit 3 is taking a look at the TMP, doing the presentation. Now you notice I started with a very thematic sort of way of approaching it, and by now I'm just focused on the performance task and letting students pick themes. Unit 4, I'm now introducing the IWA. Most of that unit, like the first half, is focused on the stimulus sources, and we're going through them one by one, trying to identify a shared theme. So just like I gave them the shared theme of justice and with the topic of reparations, now we're doing that, but instead of me giving them, now we're looking at the College Board sources. This is by far the longest unit, Unit 4, and then from here, once they have a topic, then there's a lot of lessons about like specific writing skills, citations, etc. And then from there, I have a smaller unit, usually try to keep it like 10 lessons max, where they prepare their presentation and present. From there, my sixth and final unit is the AP exam prep. And that's what it sounds like. We rehearse, we prepare, we really get ready for the exam. And then based on the way my school year works, the AP exam was like April 30th this past year. So that leaves me quite a bit of time with my students, like more than a month. And so I usually have them vote on a unit that I design. That's not unlike the first one. There's like a Socratic seminar at the end, right? A big debate. And there's a theme, some sort of controversial subject, and then I give them a packet of sources. I've done AI. This year I did drill rap, and each year I let them pick a different topic they're interested in, and then I put together a mini unit. These are also available on my Teachers Pay Teachers if you want to see what one of those would look like. And that takes me to the end of the year, essentially. So we've covered what's in the course. Secondly, we looked at how you might want to structure and incorporate themes into the course. And then last, what can you do to get started today? Well, I would recommend two things in particular. Number one, make a syllabus, a big year plan. Map out your units. I have 6 units, you might have more, but map out your units and figure out when your performance tasks are going to be due. Now, all the papers are due the same day from the College Board, but you can absolutely not wait to the last minute to have them do that. So figure out where are your breaks, where are times where I want to make sure. You should definitely give yourself a month, I would say, between when you make the final presentations due and the exam, so that you have some time to prepare for that as well. So number one, scope and sequence, ideally a syllabus. And then secondly, I would say the next thing you should do is read example papers. Familiarize yourself with what you're asking them for. That is the best way to prepare for this course. Honestly, there's so much variability otherwise. The one thing that isn't variable, that doesn't change, is the rubric, what they're looking for. Know what they're looking for. Look for exemplars provided from the College Board so you can figure out what a really great paper looks like, so you can support students to achieve that. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope that this makes you feel a little bit more confident and positive about starting a brand new course. I really think AP Seminar is so unique, and every school should consider it. It really allows students to begin to voice some of their own opinions on really important topics, as well as I hear from time and time again from my students who graduated that, like, yo, I use these skills in college. I have to write papers all the time. This is really a cool AP course that gets students ready for their next steps. All right, thank you so much, and feel free to check out my other videos, check out the materials that I have posted on Teachers Pay Teachers, and thanks again for your time. Good luck, Capstone, folks.